So, so listen, we're gonna carry on and sort of go a bit deeper into what we talked about last time. Last time we talked about um, sort of general personalisation of
Yes.
sort of journeys and how you should treat everybody differently, and we had like quite a great top level conversation, I think. And so if you haven't, I just quick note to the listener: if you've not heard that conversation, go back and listen to that because that was really interesting. And now we're going to talk a bit more specifically about that sort of concept of really, really getting super specific with an actual person and making sure
Yes.
that what you're doing for them is super tailored. So um, let's just summarize the whole last podcast, right? Just in case somebody can't be bothered going back and listening. Just give us like a 60-second pitch on why it's important to actually um, treat people differently.
Well, we know from best places to work in hospitality. We run that survey on behalf of the caterer, and we get a snapshot of around between 12 and 15,000 people every year telling us what's important to them about coming to work. And one of the top things that is important to people about coming to work is to work for an organisation that cares about them. And in my opinion, the way that you show care is about really understanding who someone is and listening to them and building rapport and really sort of, I suppose, understanding who they are as individuals. And that's really quite difficult to do through a technology platform, or has been historically. And with all the developments now in, I'm going to use the dreaded AI word, but all the developments in tech over the last 5 years, we can now really start to use technology to make sure that people are having experiences that are individual to them and that matter to them. And I think something on the flip side that's really disengaging is treating everybody exactly the same. So if you've got and do you know what? It was quite a long time ago, actually. It was probably in the sort of early 2010s. Is that what we call them? The early tweenies, whatever they're called. It was around then. We were working with the Ritz and the GM Sal at the Ritz. We had sort of our previous technology talent toolbox. We were using that there, and it had always worked quite well. And he sat down with me and he's just like, Joe, I've got a doorman. He's like approaching retirement. He's been here since he was like 20. He's probably going to be here till he dies. I don't want to sit down every 6 months and talk to him about a competency framework. And I'm like, I completely agree with you. And I think I'd been thinking it for quite a long time, but hadn't really got my head around the implications of sheep dipping everybody in the same process at the same time. And I think that was a real light bulb moment for me, because, wouldn't it be great if you knew that every single individual was on their own career journey, but from a business perspective, you had an overview of where everybody was on that journey, and you knew, hand on heart, that you were giving people the opportunity to have those conversations when they needed them, not when you as a business wanted to have them. So it was quite a journey from that conversation with Sal to where we are now. I mean, it's taken quite a long time because we're a super small business. But the aspiration is that, you can, if you want to have a conversation about your career, you can generate that. You can go and update the things that your business wants to know about you at any time. And, I can touch it. The next advent of this stuff coming through is, it's so close, and we're definitely well on the way to being able to do that. And I think, it becomes, there are technical things that we need to work through to make that happen, and people have to be engaged with a process in the first place. But yeah, I think we're really close to making it a super individual experience. And yeah, again, you've told me to give you something in a nutshell, and I've just talked for a really long time.
But do you know what's interesting is that last time we talked about sort of the importance of treating everybody different in all sorts of different scenarios,
Yes.
right? But from an employee and employer point of view, there's such benefit in taking somebody on an actual journey.
Running.
So taking somebody on an
Totally.
actual joined up journey. So somebody who has just started has got very different needs to somebody who's been with you for a month, 6 months, a year. They've gone through different roles. And I think that, I mean, I'm guilty of this as well as a leader, is that sometimes you don't think about the whole journey
No.
when you're actually kind of like plotting, somebody along on this and trying to thinking about what conversation you should have with them. So that's why I'm so fascinated in this.
And also, I think that it's a really hard thing, isn't it? Like, if on week 1 or week 4, you sit down with somebody and you say, what are your aspirations in this world? What do you want? What do you want to be? That's a quite a big leap for somebody who's, I don't know, in their 20s perhaps, to sit down with a manager in a new job and sit there and go, actually, hospitality isn't, the be all and end all for me. And actually, I want to be a musician, or I'm an artist, or I'm trying this out whilst I get my marketing degree, whatever that might look like. I think there's still this reticence to really be open and honest and share what we want to do. What you want to do at week 1 or week 4 or week 8 is still, there's that desire to please, that desire to go, yeah, no, it's really great here. I really love it. Who's asking how long are you going to stay for? What do you think's next? If you're not going to be here forever, and who is going to be here forever now in this day and age, where do you want to get to? And as a business, how can we help you get there? Because it's going to be very different from the musician to the artist to the marketing, the marketing student. And then that's giving you transparency in the organization into, okay, well, this person is doing a marketing degree. Now I know that about them. And I know that they're going to have to, drop their hours in September. However, what's to say that they couldn't potentially do a couple of mornings a week in the marketing department and learn something and come back to us every summer, or come back to us every holiday, or work for us while they're studying. I think there's just that, as the sooner that you can have that conversation, the better, and the sooner that you can understand it. And the dyed-in-the-wool hospitality professionals expecting that everybody is going to come and stay forever is just so outdated now. But we need to give people the confidence to have that conversation. You might know it, but are you sitting down with someone on week 4 who's, maybe being a little bit of a star and saying, we know you might not stay here forever? That's quite a hard thing to do as a manager, because you just see someone being really good at their job and you're like, oh, well, we need to keep them. How are we going to keep them? Well, you might never in a million years have had the chance to keep them anyway, because for millions of different reasons. Or maybe actually, the idea of being a musician after a couple of years sort of fades. And because they love working here so much, they're put into a more of a responsible role, or, they really click with the team. You don't know what's going to happen. And the only way that you can start to get a feeling for that is sitting down and having a really good conversation about it, which is more than, I think, a lot of systems similar to ours. It's still very much around performance rather than aspiration. And it's very much around, are you hitting, financial goals, not about have you got the right behaviours to be in this business. And so I think our system, we work with our clients quite closely to make sure that our system, prompts those kinds of conversations, because they're not the kinds of conversations you have as you're running around being operational. They are the sit down and take a step back. And I think one of the things that I've always said about our stuff is, we might not be able to get you to where you want to go, but we can help you on that journey. It's all about the journey. You might not be able to, help an artist exhibit somewhere, but maybe you could put up a couple of pictures up in your cafe. It's, what can we do to help you on that journey? Recognizing that you might not be here forever, and that's okay.
Yeah. No, I hadn't really thought about helping people with their personal aspirations. I mean, that's like obviously such an obvious
Yeah,
thing, especially if they're thinking that they're not going to be there forever. Because
yeah,
I guess two reasons I can think of straight away is like, one, they might stick around for a bit longer, a bit longer, which would be great, but they're going to be happier and more productive while they're there, aren't they?
yes, totally. And the loyalty and the telling someone else, oh, I'm leaving, but actually they really supported me in getting here and now I'm doing this. And oh my God, they were amazing. That advocacy from people, that's if you look at your customers, you're always looking for that net promoter score. And I would say the same for your employees. You want your employees to be leaving you and saying, that was the best place I ever worked, or looking back and saying, yeah, do you know what? That was the one. I did the podcast with Chris Fletcher, and he still remembers the Hard Rock Cafe. He still remembers their values. He hasn't worked there for billions of years. He'll kill me for that because that makes him sound like a dinosaur. But he still remembers, and he's like, that's the best place I ever worked. And because at that point in time, it was completely the right place for him.
Yeah.
Like their values were aligned. It was in the right place. It was just right. And that helped. But he will look back at that place and still talk about it with such passion and admiration. And don't you want that from every single person that comes through your doors as an employer? And you can do that by chance by having a really great manager. But how are you making that happen in the business? How are you influencing that culture? You can't control it. You can't control a culture. Culture will happen. But you can influence it by doing the right things, which is having your managers have this type of conversation and personalising those journeys and those touch points. And if you've got graduates in your business, for example, we've got a couple of clients who have a graduate scheme. Now, those graduates, they're young, they're being thrown into sort of fairly senior management positions, maybe quite quickly. They're transitioning through different departments. Those people you want to catch up with and have more conversations with because they're looking to develop within your business and you're looking for them to develop and get to a certain level and then, step into a management position. The conversations you need to have with them are very, very different to the conversations that you'll be having with one of your managers who's in housekeeping, who, absolutely loves their job and wants to be there forever. It's a really different conversation, but to come to the same means. And I think that's what's exciting about the technology now is that we can start identifying these groups and these individuals and surface stuff for them when they need it, not when we think they do.
Mm.
When we started Carrero, we didn't put any sort of backup, like any notifications. It was almost like, it's your career. You can come on at any time and you can request a conversation and you can do. I mean, did it work? No, because I'm sitting here in the Cotswolds and, living my fantasy. This is what should happen life. And actually, you do need some push from the business, and the business does need to get involved in making sure these conversations happen. They don't happen naturally, but that's the dream one day that people will just say, oh, actually, I'm just going to pop in and update this now because something's changed for me, or yeah, I've completed this goal, or I've hit this KPI. I can go in, I can do it. I have a conversation with my manager and I don't have to wait till whenever. And things happen in the business where, every year you have to hit certain targets, but that doesn't mean that every single person should have goals that last for a year. It just life doesn't work like that. There has to be more flexibility.
Yeah, 100%. So later, sort of in about 5 episodes or so, we're going to actually start focusing in quite some detail on specific questions that can be asked inside of Carrero, which I'm super excited for, actually. But what I thought would be quite interesting on this podcast is to think about the journey of an employee. So when they start, let's say all the way up to them spending their whole career, which some people might do in a hospitality business. I know it's not very common. What are your thoughts on the type of things that employers should focus on in that sort of chronological order? Let's kind of go through. So, and we don't need to go into like a crazy amount of detail, but just some pointers about what are the main things that employers should be focusing on, or what are these conversations? What conversations would be most beneficial? So let's think about when somebody first starts. What's the focus?
Yeah. So first start, if you have a joined up tech stack, which would be my recommendation. At the end of day one, and actually the NED are doing this. So at the end, so everybody has a day one experience, and that's great for them because they're a single site, right? So they can do that. Every new starter spends the day learning stuff about the NED. And at the end of that day, they're asked to get their phones out and join, the NED comms platform. And they go on that. And what we're doing with them is that at the end of day one, we're just asking them 3 questions, just around how was that day? Are they excited? Because from that, you start getting a measure not only of, let's have a look at where we can maybe improve stuff within that first day for people, but you're starting to get them used to interacting with you over a piece of technology. And this is, their one-stop shop for all things that they need to find out about their careers and their time at the NED. And, it's not just us stuff, it's their learning and their rota and, all payroll, all the things. But what we're interested in at Carrero is understanding how was that first day for you? And, hopefully the manager doesn't need to do anything at this point. However, if something is flagged as something that's not gone very well, at that point, the team can pick up on it. Now, that could be the HR team, it could be the person's manager, it could be a number of people. But at the end of day one, you really want to be understanding that everyone's had a good day, and the same at end of week 1. And I would recommend week 4, week 8, and then we're up to our 100 days. And we know that those first 100 days are critical, first 3 months. People will decide whether they're going to stay and engage, stay and, do the job till something better comes along, or they're just not going to be here. What I wouldn't recommend, by the way, is waiting till that 3 months comes to have a conversation if you can feel it going wrong. But having those touch points along the way to that 3 months and asking people questions about, have we met your expectations? Or, how do you feel about here? It's when somebody first walks into an organization, they will pick up things that your people that have been there for 5 years will not see anymore. The poster that's falling off the wall, the fact that the food isn't very nice, the fact that, there's 3 dead plants in a corner of the wherever you have lunch together. So, it's a really, really critical time, not only for you to understand that people are happy and settling in and you're getting to know them, but that, you can get some really valuable feedback in that period of time. So it's really is a 2-way conversation. So the first, I think that's the most critical time. Those first 3 months is to be having regular check-ins, and loads of, as we'll go into, loads of different questions you can ask.
Let me just stop you there a sec. Sorry,
yeah,
to clarify that then. So how many times would you have those conversations in 3 months?
It depends on, so we can do them as often or as little as you want. What I would recommend is day 1, week 1, week 4, week 8, week 12. However, often day 1 and week 1, you might only have the conversation if something is triggered. So we can always you could ask a question every week if you wanted to, and only have a conversation if somebody rates below a 6 on a 1 to 10 scale, or if you're asking them if they've got everything they need to do a good job. If they say no, then that might trigger a conversation, if that makes sense. So if everything's fine, maybe you don't need to have a conversation. Maybe it's okay. I think most organizations that genuinely care are looking for people to have those conversations at least for 8 and 12. Week 1 and day 1 often depends on lots of things, but that does often depend on the technology, if I'm honest, because week 1 is so much information, it's information overload, that if all your tech isn't in one place and there isn't just a little question pop up saying, how are you? Is that going to happen? I mean, I would definitely recommend, I would hope that every manager is checking in with their people during that time, whether you do it through the tech or not, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I haven't had that many people work for me over the years, but if somebody new joins my business, I'm everything okay? you're genuinely interested in making sure that person has a good experience because you've just been through a whole recruitment process, get them in the door, like look after them. So yeah, but it does depend on the business, and we can flex it depending on the business.
Okay.
And then it's hard to say because every business is different after that. So some people then drop into almost like, I would say, give people the opportunity to have a conversation every 3 months.
Nice.
Now, they might not take that opportunity. And as a manager, you might not need to have that conversation for whatever reasons, but it's almost give the opportunity to. 3 months is quite a long time. It does go quite quickly, as I know, when you're setting, I think, what we now through, yeah, we're coming up fast, aren't we, into Q4. And I think that unless you're checking in on people every 3 months, things can change. In fast-moving businesses, you want to be doing that. That said, we talked on the last podcast about time being a sticking point and an issue. But let's say that, 80% of your people don't need to have a conversation with you about their careers every 3 months. There might be 20% that do, and they're the people that might go if you don't make that time to have it. So I think for me, it's about opportunity to have rather than forcing people to. So give people the option to have a conversation or not have a conversation. And as a manager, if you want to have a conversation, have the conversation.
Mm. So what's your thoughts on having like, because I think when most people think about career conversations, they think about either a bi-yearly, so every 6 months, or every 12 months, this sort of formal, let's call it appraisal. A lot of people call it an appraisal, don't they?
We don't like appraisal.
Yeah, so does this fit into sort of the Carrero journey? Like what does Carrero think about these sort of really formal appraisals?
And make them as informal as possible. Nobody wants to sit there and work through 8 different like a competency framework. I think that's a fairly static way of doing things. I think that most of our organisations do like to collect data around the same time, so might give people a 3-month window. So sometimes we have our clients where they might do a slightly longer conversation where they're talking about performance in terms of values and goals, and bringing those two things together as a measure of performance. And that might happen maybe once a year and then can be updated at any time by anybody. But it's more of have the conversation once and then just check back in on it. Has anything changed? I think that's where I would be going with it. But most of our clients, they do have once or twice a year where they'll have a bigger, more focused conversation. And then they'll have other touch points during the year where it might be just, how are things going since that conversation? And is everything still the same? Oh, and also let's have a chat about your well-being, or let's have a chat about, what development you think you might need, or how you're getting on with your goals. So it's because Carrero, by its very nature, is so flexible and so bespoke to each organisation. That's part of my job, is to sit down and understand how things work here. If you're already in the flow of having really good career conversations, I'd push for, the opportunity to do it every 3 months. If you've never had one before, ever, and people look at you like you're mental when you talk about an appraisal, then I'd say, well, let's be a bit more gentle and let's ease people in. I mean, it's a change, it's a culture change when you're trying to introduce this kind of thing. So there's a bit of embedding that needs to happen before we can really ramp up and do everything that we want to do with it. And again, as I'll say, it depends on your tech stack, because we will want to push through wherever your people are. And if your people are still in we only get information when our manager decides to tell us, and we may or may not have a personal email address registered on the HR system, we can still work with you. But it's not going to be as effective as if you've got a really comprehensive comms tool, which is totally embedded, where we just pop up and go, hey, we'd love to know how you're feeling. And that's the importance for us of integrating with other people who are also on this journey of wanting to make it individual.
Yeah, and we did a podcast on tech stacks, didn't we, actually? So we'll leave the link to that in the show notes. What are your thoughts on people who are further along in their journey? So let's say, you've been lucky enough to have an employee who's been with you for 5, 10, 15 years. Is there
Yeah.
anything specific that employers maybe should be thinking about asking or having or talking through with somebody like that?
Yeah, I
Something like
think,
that's different to
yeah.
maybe somebody who's been around for like 1 year.
And I think it depends whether that person still is looking to grow within the organization, or is actually just really, really good at their job and wants to do it every day. And I think that's where I talk about opportunity. It's almost like, if you said, look, would you like to have a conversation about this? Has anything changed for you? It's almost like an acknowledgement that they could just come into the system and say, no, you're all right, I don't need to. And as long as a manager, that really is the case and it's not just to get out, because I think that's what happens a lot with our clients when we offer that functionality. They're like, oh no, but I need everyone to have a conversation because I don't necessarily trust my managers will know if a person says, I don't want to have that conversation. So there's I think there's still work to do on trust within organizations, on trust and transparency. And the fact that if somebody is like, no, do you know what? I'm absolutely fine, that whoever's looking after this system, the people and culture team, absolutely trust that the manager will make that call and say, no, you probably are. Nothing has changed. I can see that on a day-to-day basis. Or actually, no, you just don't want to sit down with me for 10 minutes and talk about this. Or as a manager, I do know that there have been cases of some managers who don't want to have the conversation. So they'll frame it in oh, you don't need a conversation, do you? And that's for
It's a
all
leading
kinds of
question, isn't it?
reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but what I would say about people that have been in the business for a really long time is that we're still going to ask about what's next for you, because it might be, I'm really happy here, but maybe you'd like a few extra challenges. Maybe you'd like more responsibility. Maybe you'd like to mentor someone else. Maybe, it doesn't, businesses evolve and change and ebb and flow, and so do individuals. So just because 6 months ago somebody was 100% happy, and that might have changed. Something might have changed within that team that means that they do want to do something a bit different, or they are thinking about their career slightly differently, or a role might have opened up that they could be interested in, or things do change. And so we can't be complacent in thinking just because somebody's been there for 15 years that they're going to stay another 15 years. And what it's very unlikely, if you've got someone that's been there for 15 years, that the person they're reporting into has also been there that length of time. So what's the reverse education you can get from that person, and why not use these conversations to have that kind of chat as well? So I think they're still valuable. It might not be for the same purpose, but we should still 100% be having them.
Yeah.
And also just appreciation. It's not just about, have you done your job? Have you met your goals? What do you want to do next? It's about, hey, let's talk about you. Let's talk about how great you are. Let's appreciate who you are. I think the thing with, and again, I hate the term performance reviews or talent management, it feels very, you're right, it feels very formal. Appraisals, it feels very backward looking and not very friendly and positive. But actually, if you're not coming out of that meeting thinking, well, I'm definitely going to stay for the next 3 to 6 months because I've just had such a good conversation. I feel so happy with the challenges that we've discussed, and, how I'm going to feel better every morning about coming here, then the job hasn't been done.
Mm. So are there any other key points in the journey that you feel are important to have conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely if things change within the business. So often, businesses get sold or get, people, there's a merge and people get acquired. And I think for both the business that's acquiring and the business that's selling, and also, if you get a big stream of funding or something like that, whenever there's a big change in the business, I think people are quite good at sort of saying, oh, you've been promoted, you should probably now look at this 3-month window again. So if you get promoted, that's a point where, again, we shouldn't just assume it's going to be okay because you've been in business. You should go through that we write questions for people that have been promoted. But if the business undergoes a big change, surely we should be checking in and having conversations with people about how they're feeling about that. And that one seems to get missed quite a lot. It's almost, I know of organisations where their people have found out that they're either being acquired or they've got a huge round of funding because they see it in the news. And maybe sometimes that has to happen or stuff gets leaked. But what are we doing a week after that, 4 weeks after that? Are all the managers in the business sitting down with people and saying, right, do you know what? Maybe I don't 100% know what's going on in the business, but what I want to do is have a conversation with you about how you're feeling about that and what that might look like for us. Or, if there's a big threat of, people having to make savings and, I do quite a lot of judging, and it's like, but sometimes people will put in a comment like, the people team saved X number of £100,000 last year and don't put in how, and it immediately goes into my head. So basically you're entering an award just for sacking a load of people. And you might have had to do that and you might have done that really well and responsibly, but let me know that's happened. But what happens to everybody else in the organisation? How are you left feeling if there's been a big change? And why aren't we sitting down and having conversations with people at that point? And I think now with technology like Carrero, that's much easier to put into place and just say, hey, we know things have changed. Would you like to have a chat about it? Yes or no? It's really easy to put in. And if someone says yes, sit down and have a conversation. Even if as a manager, you don't have all the information, just be really open and honest and transparent. This is what I do know. And these are the things I can tell you at the moment. But feel confident that we have your best interests at heart. Whatever happens, we're going to do it for the best interest of the business, best interest in you, and we'll be as transparent as we can be. I think it's reassuring people sometimes as well, and it can be used for that.
Yeah. Or I was thinking like a rebrand, like hospitality companies often go through like a rebrand and a relaunch within like a lease period, don't they? And that, I guess, could be quite an unsettling period for staff because they don't always know why that's happened or whatever, and if their job's safe or whatever. So that's a good point. Are there any other sort of key times that you think that we might have missed where a conversation would be particularly useful?
Yeah, I mean, I think again it comes down to individuals. So every time something changes within an individual's job role, you should almost flip back to, and as I just mentioned there, so I've been promoted, so I'm in a new job now. It might be in the same company. So am I going through that week 1, week 4, week 8 process, different questions to when you first join a company, but still going through that process again, because it's going to be strange and you're going to be in the same business but maybe in a different team or doing different things. And how do you settle in, and how do you start to build that relationship with your manager, and how is your manager building that relationship with you, even though you might have worked together before? And again,
and what about like job description changes and things like that? If something else is needed of a employee within the same role.
I think if it's a significant one, then, maybe not the same cadence in terms of those ones. But if it's a significant one, then there should be any change. I guess you could just check back in, 4 weeks later, hey, this is, we appreciate this has changed. And I think that's one of my, I suppose, a challenge for businesses is that in this world in which I inhabit, which is all about having conversations with people, and you've brought up a number of times in our podcast, it's about time, and it's like, well, we don't have time to sit down with everybody and check in on how they're feeling and all the rest of it. But it's so important, and people feel so valued when you do take that time. But that has to be a business decision as well. You have to give your you can't just expect somebody to become a manager of people and still do exactly the same as they were doing before. It's like, where is my time to hone my leadership skills? Where is my time to make sure that I can have a one-to-one with people when I need to have it and when they need it as well? And I think there's a bit of a gap still there in terms of, are we giving our leaders enough time to have these conversations and not feel like they're really, really stretched? So yeah, that's a conversation that we have when we go and start talking to clients about not only what does good look like here, but have you got a culture where your managers have got the psychological space to sit down and have this type of conversation. Take people off job and do it, not just do it as you're running around.
Perfect. Superb. Well, listen, I think we've given people quite, hopefully quite a few useful things to think about there, and things to focus on at different points in the journey. So yeah, I think that would be really useful. We mentioned a couple of podcast episodes, some previous ones in this, so I'll put the show notes in. Put the links to those, in the show notes. People can go and check those out as well. Jo, amazing as always. Thank you so much for your time, and love that.
Thank you. Lovely to see you.
And I'll see you on the next one.
Yeah, we'll do. Bye.
Bye.